The Edmonton Oilers pulled off their best win of the season, coming from 3 goals down to beat the surging Colorado Avalanche 4-3. A whole lot to talk about on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers. I'm your host, Nick Zararis. I want to thank everyone who's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's show, the best win of the season, a wide-ranging conversation about how to try and find meaningful takeaways from individual games, and an ode to the Superline, because my goodness, were McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman out of their minds tonight in what was a difficult come-from-behind victory. So, at the top, we talked about it a lot last night, coming off of the game they pulled out of their butts last night. And it's really something that's remarkable when you find ways to win consistently in spite of less than ideal situations. It is really as strong a ringing endorsement as you can have of a hockey team. When you have the capacity to come back from multi-goal deficits to the point that you're over 500 on the year in games where the other team scores first, that is really, really impressive. The Oilers are 12-10-0 in games where the other team scores first. The simple matter of the fact is, what we know about the sport of hockey, it is really difficult to come from behind consistently and still find ways to win games because of the shape the game typically takes. Once you fall behind, the other team starts to settle into the game. They have more opportunities to score because you have to become more aggressive to create. And the Avalanche don't have the same juice they may have had the last couple of seasons. They are very injured. They've lost a lot of their quality depth over the last handful of seasons since winning the Stanley Cup. They're down to a third different goalie this year, and Mackenzie Blackwood has been very good for them. So I want to be fair in my assessment of the Avalanche. Blackwood has been good. I did have somebody in the YouTube comments of a video earlier this week say, "You're worried about the Avalanche's goaltending. Aren't you worried about the Oilers' goaltending?" Yes, I am. Of course I'm worried about the Oilers' goaltending. Anytime you don't have one of those 5 or 6 elite goalies, you should be worried about your goaltending. I think, frankly, if you don't have one of those 5 or 6 great guys, even if you have an upper tier guy in that middle group, if you have a Swayman, an Ottinger, Philip Gustafsson, I like all of those guys. I think they all have the capacity to be very good goalies, but they're not Shesterkin, they're not Vasilevsky, they're not Hellebuck, they're not Saros, they're not Bobrovsky. You're a tier below for a reason. Those guys I just mentioned have all strung together several seasons that have gotten them Vezina consideration, whereas Ottinger, Swayman, Gustafsson, that next tier of guys down, they all have potential. They all have the capacity to maybe elevate their games to get into that next tier, but they've yet to do that. So I wanted to say that for that person who may or may not be watching or listening to this episode, but I do like reading the comments to see if I'm missing things. But the Avalanche are a quality NHL team. And again, their record is not as good as it's been in years past. Their roster is not as deep as it's been in years past. But when you look at that roster and you talk about Nathan MacKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Cale Makar, there are very few teams in the sport that can match that firepower. I think objectively, if you want to be fair and you want to talk about the long-term samples of all of those guys, I think there's a strong argument that's the best 1, 2, 3 in the entire league when you accumulate everything. Because there are going to be Oiler fans who say, well, Nick, wouldn't you take the Oilers guys over Colorado's? I would, but that is not the same thing as saying they are more talented, because I'm taking Connor over Nate Dogg. I love Nathan MacKinnon. He has arguably the most dog in him of any of the superstars in the NHL, because he has that real meanness to him that you need from your best players. Overall, based on samples, I would take Mikko Rantanen over Draisaitl. This year in particular, though, I would take Leon, and then you're taking Makar over Bouchard. I think there's a real argument Cale Makar might end up with a Nick Lidstrom, Bobby Orr-esque trophy case when all's said and done, because he's going to be a Norris finalist pretty much every year he's in the league. As long as he's in the league, he'll have ample chances to win gold medals, have a chance to win a medal at Four Nations. But this was a really, really fun hockey game. When you get into these open-ended shootouts, for lack of a better word, you think about the OK Corral if you're a Red Dead Redemption enthusiast. You think about the old school shootouts. There was a lot of offense in this game, and you give credit where it's due. The Oilers early on, they got behind, and Mackenzie Blackwood was stifling them. Mackenzie Blackwood had a really good game for them, and Blackwood is somebody I have really had a wide range of thoughts on over the years. His best season as a pro was that 56-game season 4 years ago for the Devils. And since then, he's had nagging injuries. He had an injury with the Devils that didn't get managed properly, and he ended up losing his footing there, ended up in San Jose. Now he's in Colorado, where he's played very well. Coming into tonight, Blackwood had yet to give up 3 goals in a game, let alone 4 as a member of the Avalanche. So the Oilers were able to break new ground there. And the biggest thing for me, the Oilers have shown a dramatic level of resilience over the last 2 days. Remember, they played the Wild, who are also in a playoff spot, less than 24 hours ago on the road. Then they come down to Colorado, and they go down 3-0 to a team that has played really well over the last few weeks and is climbing their way back up into the mix. Colorado is in that first wild card spot. They're 2 points back of Dallas for third in the Central, 3 points back of Minnesota for second. That's a good team. To score 4 unanswered against what is a playoff team and has a chance to be a divisional playoff team, meaning not one of the wild cards, to mount up, to cowboy up like that is a level of resilience that not a lot of teams can muster. Coming from behind multi-goal deficits consecutive nights in a row against playoff teams. And look, we talked about this on yesterday's show. It's not a good habit to get into, to consistently fall behind to good teams, because more often than not, good teams are going to keep piling on. The example, of course, being the Penguins game last Thursday night, where the Penguins got out to the 3-0 lead. The Oilers hung around. They kept crawling their way back in, but they ran out of time. And that's really the conundrum you face when you get off to these slow starts. And I'm not ready to say the Oilers are making this a consistently bad habit, because it's only been over the course of a week and a half. But the simple matter of the fact is, you go down multiple goals to Pittsburgh, multiple goals to Chicago. You do okay against the Kings. You don't give up any goals there. You win 1-0. You go down multiple goals to Minnesota. You go down multiple goals to Colorado. That's really tough, because when you are trailing by multiple goals, you're going to start to run a shorter bench. Your coach is going to start to plug away on the same guys over and over again to push their buttons. And in the short term, that's fine. It's one game. You will cope. You will be okay. But over the long haul, if you are consistently in these games where you need to run your super line of Connor Leon and Zach Hyman as much as they did tonight to get back in this game, that does take a toll on you over time. We're going to take our first break of today's show. We're going to explore a little bit more whether or not the Oilers getting off to slow starts is anecdotal or if it's in the stats. We're going to talk about that super line and a whole lot more. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. There's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. If you want to go look at the slate, this is my favorite weekend of the year, the NFL divisional round. The Texans going to Kansas City, where the Chiefs are 8.5-point favorites. Saturday night, the Commanders heading up to Detroit, where the Lions are 8.5-point favorites. Sunday afternoon, the Rams heading to Philly to take on the Eagles, where the Eagles are 6.5-point favorites. And then your number one contenders match, 2 MVP favorites, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, in Buffalo Sunday night, where the Ravens are 1.5-point favorites. All of that is over at FanDuel.com. So join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoffs unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Friday edition of Locked On Oilers, where we're unpacking one of the great wins you're going to see in the NHL in the regular season this year. Coming back from a 3-goal deficit is just not something that happens all that often. The Oilers hadn't done it in 10 years, if I remember the stat I saw on Twitter correctly. This is not something that teams can consistently do. It is not something you want to get in the habit of doing, but it shows you the potential. It shows you the capacity. And when you are going through the course of a long regular season, and regular listeners of Locked On Oilers know, we are talking about an 8 to 10 month odyssey if everything goes right. You show up second week of September back in Edmonton for captain skates. You do preseason testing. You play preseason games. Your season starts that first to second week of October, depending on the way the calendar lays out. The entirety of October, November, December, January, February, March, April. You are playing 7.5 months of hockey. We usually go to the second week-ish of April. 7.5 months of hockey just to make the playoffs. To get to the Stanley Cup final, you're playing the entirety of April, the entirety of May, and well into the month of June if you are going to go the entire distance. You need to find ways to pull out when you are to pull wins out when you are in less than advantageous situations. And I've said this a ton this year on the show, and I really do think it matters. Adversity reveals character. It doesn't build it. That is not something that everyone reacts well to. Sure, over time, you can calcify, you can harden, you can scab over and start to become better in adverse situations. But ultimately, and I forget where I heard this for the first time, but it might have been in Band of Brothers, it might have been in a movie, it might have been in a documentary, I can't recall, but the person said, bravery is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward in spite of that fear. And that manifests differently in sports than, we would say if you were in World War II. That's a different type of bravery. But having the conviction and the internal strength to say, it's only 3 goals, this is doable. What do we always say in hockey? Give us 1 going into the intermission. We only need 2. 2 is a lot easier than 3. We chip away, we chip away, we chip away. If we get it to 1, all we need is 1. We already did the hard part. We scored 2 straight and we didn't give 1 up. All we need is 1 more. You tie this game and then you're buzzing. At that point, the confidence you're going to get from scoring 3 straight goals unanswered, the heat that other team is going to be feeling. You think about it from the Colorado perspective of, we're shorthanded, we're missing quite a few guys. We had Drouin get injured during the course of this game and miss a few shifts, miss some of a period, but you feel pretty good. You're up 3-0. Your goalie, who is yet to give up 3 goals in a game as a member of your team, you are peppering their starter in Stuart Skinner. You know they're not going to be able to go to Calvin Pickard if you score a 4th goal because Pickard played last night, and you're not going to do that to your backup goalie. Bring him into a game on the second half of a back-to-back after he played the night before. So if you're Colorado, you get it to 4, this game's over. But to their credit, Arvidsson makes a nice play scoring that goal to get them on the board. Once you're on the board, the hard part is over, because It's simply a matter of proving it. And you can talk about that in a lot of different contexts over the course of a long season. You know, we always say it. One good shift, two good shifts, three good shifts, four good shifts, good period. Good period, good period, good period, good game. Good game, good game, good game, good week, good week, good week, good week, good month, good month, good month, good month, good month, good month, good season. Good season, good playoff series. Good playoff series, good playoff series, Stanley Cup. It is so granular. And a lot of the individual sequences, a lot of the individual plays will be lost to history. I watched the entirety of the game tonight, and I can tell you, I do not remember every single pass of every single play. I don't remember every icing. I don't remember every faceoff. But when you accumulate good results in a long term, a long range process, and you stack that day over day, week over week, month over month, that does start to matter. Because when you have this in your toolbox where, for lack of a better word, McDavid can go sicko mode, he can tweak, and he can go out of his mind the way he did tonight, the way he did last night against Minnesota. When you have a superstar who is a central force, you know, a heliocentric player where the entire game orbits around him, and he can do it at the same time the other team has two or three of them. You know, Leon's on that tier. I don't think Bush is that level of player. I think he's a notch below. The other team has three of those heliocentric. The game revolves around them. They would be the best player on a lot of teams in the NHL, in McKinnon, Makar, and Rantanen. And McDavid said, we're not losing. And every now and then, when you get to watch the best in the world lock in to the point they are moving the game by themselves, that's when you start to really, you cross your arms, you start to smirk and you shrug. Like, what can you do? I mean, what would you like Colorado to do? The best hockey player on the planet locked in and said, we're not losing. Good luck. I invite any team in the NHL. And look, I know McDavid is human. There will come a point where he won't be able to do this anymore. But on a nightly basis, he does things that no one else can. You think about the sequence to set up the goal he scores tonight and how important it was in the context of the game where they find a way to put heat on Colorado. And at that point, McDavid gets it to 3-all. You get it to 3-all going into the third period, and you feel like you are about to steal one because you had absolutely zero business getting back in this hockey game. And not only did you get back in this hockey game, you tied it. So you are overflowing with confidence, feeling great about yourself. And Colorado is looking around shell-shocked. You know, the Sam Darnold playing the Patriots. I feel like I'm seeing ghosts out there because these are really good teams. But every now and then, when the superstars go mano-a-mano, someone occasionally gets sunned. And look, I'm not going to go out there and say the Oilers dominated this game. They were losing 3-0. But that third period, man, Connor was locked in. And look, McKinnon had a good game. He scored two. The first goal he scores is ridiculous. And he's a great player. McKinnon won the Hart last year. He's a perennial Hart finalist because of how good he is. He set an Avalanche record for points in a season last year. Tonight, McDavid got the better of him, and that's going to happen. These teams play, I believe, one more time in the regular season, and it's always exciting. You know, Bob Stauffer mentioned it during the intermission. Of the last 10 times these teams have played each other, 6 have gone to overtime. These are very evenly matched teams with superfluous star power oozing all over the place, and it made for a great hockey game. We're going to take one more break on today's show. We come back, we'll tie a bow on the win over the Avalanche and set the tone for the weekend. So be sure to stick around to this edition of Locked On Oilers. It presents an incredible mental challenge because, like we were talking about in that second segment, when you want to think about game to game, week to week. It becomes a thought exercise. It becomes a living, breathing experiment. How much can I really take away from an individual game? Further, how much more can I take away from an individual player within an individual game? Because all of these games have different contexts. Your opponent, the matchups you're going to get, the ice time you're going to get, how many penalties are going to be called in the game, how are the goalies going to play because goaltender variance is so high. Save percentage is at a historic low post 2013 lockout this season. When you try to make a broad, sweeping generalization off of a singular game or a few games, I opened the show by saying, do the Oilers have a slow start problem? You look at the last 5 games, you think about getting behind not just one, multiple goals to good teams. You get behind the Minnesota, you get behind to Colorado tonight. You also got behind the Pittsburgh, you got behind the Chicago. You did all right against the Kings, but when you consistently start to notice a pattern, as a person who does this, who loves trying to solve problems, it presents a question. How much can I really take away? And hockey is not like football. Football, I can watch the tape and I can see, oh, they're playing with 2 high safeties. So the offense is moving the ball very efficiently because they're going to run the ball because they have a numbers advantage. It is a lot more linear chess-wise in football. In baseball, it's the same thing. If a lineup is struggling to get guys on base, you can analyze the pitch mix. You can look at the splits of lefty righty. There's a lot more information. So much of hockey is based on individual decision making within a chaotic environment. How much can I really take away from what Evan Bouchard did tonight? You think about how badly he got burned on the one McKinnon goal, and then you think about, well, he also scored an absolute rocket to give the Oilers the lead. So how much do I want to say, well, I personally think Evan Bouchard is a very good hockey player. So I am more inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt when he makes a mistake. And I don't even want to call getting burned by Nathan McKinnon a mistake. McKinnon is the second or third best player in the world. And Bouchard is not Gus Forsling. He's not Matthias Ekholm. He's not Jacob Slavin. He's not an elite defensive defenseman. What makes Bouchard as good as he is, his positioning, his IQ, his puck skills. He's not going to take away shooting lanes. He's not going to clog the middle of the ice as well as those defensive specialists I just mentioned. He's an okay skater, but when you put him in a one-on-one with McKinnon, who's one of the most, if not the single most dynamic power skaters in the entire league, something else about McKinnon that has always struck me is he's very bendy. And that might sound like a silly observation, but we observe this trait a lot in football when we're talking about pass rushers on the defensive line. How low can they get? And McKinnon always does a really nice job of dipping his shoulders to create leverage, where if he's skating to a he's skating head on with a defender, he'll dip his shoulder away from said defender as a means of protecting the puck to keep the puck away from the defenseman and the strong side, which would be the side the player's holding their stick with, because most defensemen, as we all know, you're going to hold that stick with one hand so you can reach further than you can with two. You can't reach as far with two hands as you can with one. So when McKinnon dips his shoulder, he's creating a leverage advantage where he can get lower, he can move a little bit faster, and that defender has to take it slightly different angle because McKinnon dips his shoulder so well. And it's a means of deception because you protect the puck a little bit better, you can skate a little bit faster, you have a lower center of gravity, so you're a little harder to knock off the puck. And because of that, it just opens up more options. I spent a good 3 minutes last night on yesterday's show talking about the McDavid goal against the Wild, where he put the defender in an impossible situation. If you make a perfect play as a defender and McDavid still scores a goal, What are you going to what's coach going to tell you? There's nothing you can do. And that's kind of that is really what I've tried to dedicate this particular NHL season, 2024 to 2025 to. I love talking about hockey in the abstract. I love thinking about this the way I would think about an academic problem, the way I would say, well, if this is happening, what can we definitively say is true? If the Oilers are consistently giving up goals first, what does the evidence say? Is that anecdotal or is that true? If you go and look this year, the Oilers have been outscored coming into tonight. So these stats don't include the first period of the game against the Avalanche. Coming into tonight, the opponents had outscored the Oilers 41-36 in the first period. In the second period, the Oilers have outscored opponents 61-34. In the third period, opponents have outscored the Oilers 42-41, and the Oilers have outscored opponents 7-3 in overtime. So when you add all of that up, you can anecdotally, and it's not just anecdotally because you have those stats, you can say the Oilers do get off to slow starts, but because of the way their team is structured, the way they play, the style they maintain, how effective their power play is, how good their penalty kill has been as of late, you can say they are able to make up for their mistakes. They are able to take advantage of opponents getting a little comfortable. They put a lot of heat on them. And tonight is the perfect storm. You're not going to get those Brett Kulak, Victor Arvidsson goals all that often. You know, those are supporting cast goals. You know, that's Martin Sheen and Mark Wahlberg in The Departed. Those guys are not who the movie is built around. They play an important role in the movie. They are part of what moves the plot forward. But we know this movie is built around Connor, Leon, and Evan Bouchard. Sure, Zach Hyman, Ekholm. We go further down, we get to Skinner and Kulak and Nuge and Henry. But this ship is built around our stars. And the stars were great tonight. And when they played together, they were lights out. They outchanced Colorado's guys 22-13. They had 8-5 advantage in shots, 2-1 advantage in goals. They had a 0.89 to 0.38 expected goals advantage. They had an 8-2 high danger chances advantage. The Oilers big boys put the team on their back tonight and put together one of the great performances we're going to see in the NHL regular season this year. I don't want to say I'm in awe of how good they are, because that sounds a little disingenuous about somebody who watches the Oilers every game and does a podcast and really consumes a ton of hockey. But it's miraculous to watch sometimes, to see these generational talents simply look around and say, follow me, I'll get us out of here, the way Connor did tonight. And it's something you cannot take for granted as a hockey fan. These are the types of players. These are once every 15, 20 year type guys. And Leon is right there. And you have them both on the same team. So I am going to go bask in this win for a little bit before I get to bed. I will talk to you guys going into next week. The Oilers have a Hockey Night in Canada showdown. Late puck drop, 10 p.m. on the East Coast against the Canucks Saturday night. Have an episode for you for Monday. I will talk to you guys then. Everyone, please, 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 if you could be so kind, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave the show a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that alarm bell. We're creeping up towards 1,800 subs. Want to get to 2,000 by the start of the playoffs. That's the goal. Get on board now, so by the time the playoffs come, you are ready to diagnose exactly what the Oilers need to do in their first round series, which very well might be against the LA Kings again. Everyone have a safe and fun weekend. I will talk to you guys on Monday. Until then, let's go Oilers.